I'm Nick Westergaard, and this is On Brand, helping you tell your story. Ari Paparo is a leading voice in the world of advertising technology with a career that's helped shape how digital ads work today. Ari has led product teams at major companies like AppNexus and Bazaar Voice and played a key role in creating industry standards like is it VAST or VAST?
It's VAST.
Okay. VAST video spec and Nielsen's digital ad ratings. These days, he's focused on making sense of the complex ad tech world through his company, Marketecture, where he hosts a popular podcast, publishes newsletters, and speaks at industry events. He's also the author of Yield, How Google Bought, Built, and Bullied Its Way to Advertising Dominance. My interview with Ari Paparo is coming right up. But first,
are you tired of juggling multiple software tools to manage your agency? Say hello to Deltek Workbook, the ultimate solution for marketing and communication agencies. With Workbook, you can streamline your projects, resources, and finances all in one place. Imagine real-time dashboards and reports giving you full visibility into your projects, people, and financials. Plan your team's capacity weeks in advance to avoid bottlenecks while staying on budget to maximize project margins. Plus, Workbook works perfectly for both agencies and in-house marketing teams looking to boost efficiency and profitability. And here's the best part. At PCI, we're a certified Deltek partner and reseller offering expert implementation, integrations, and ongoing support to ensure your success. Want to see how Deltek Workbook can transform your operations? For a free consultation, visit pci.us/podcast today. That's pci.us/podcast.
quick question. How confident are you that your content actually connects in every market? If you're guessing, it might be time to check out Phrase. Phrase is the industry-leading AI localization platform that helps you deliver content in multiple languages without losing your tone, your message, or your mind. It automates the manual work, slashes review time, and gives you real data on what's working where. Brands like Uber and Zendesk trust Phrase to scale their content across the globe and get it right every time. If you're serious about reaching more people and driving better results internationally, head over to phrase.com/MPN and take a look. That's phrase.com/MPN. Ari Paparo, welcome to On Brand.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
So I want to talk a bit about your book, Yield, because in the subtitle specifically, we've got Google bought, built, and bullied its way to advertising dominance. So I wondered if we could maybe work through those three Bs. Is that how the book's organized?
In effect, yeah. So the book is sort of bookended by the start is Google's entry into the advertising world outside of search. So we all know of Google as the dominant force in search. There's an antitrust trial saying they have a monopoly in search, but that's not what this book's about. This book's about their entry into the rest of the advertising world, mostly banner ads on TVs, ads on mobile devices. So the book starts with their acquisition of a company called DoubleClick in New York, and I worked there, so I was part of that story. This isn't a memoir, but I was there, and that was the bought part. And they subsequently, after buying this company DoubleClick that had a really pivotal role in the advertising world, they then built. They spent a lot of resourcing on improving and upgrading and modernizing the technology that mostly publishers and advertisers use. This is a very high-tech world. If you're not that familiar, I know your audience probably is pretty familiar, but if you're not, the process by which a banner ad shows up on the top of a web page is really complicated. It's as or more complicated than like high-speed trading on Wall Street. So Google had a big part of building that, although they weren't the only ones. It's a very competitive market. And I worked at some companies that competed with it, built our own technology. So they deserve some credit for like moving things forward. But then the story really takes a turn kind of in the mid 2010s, like 14, 15, when Google finds itself as both the buyer and the seller, and in some cases the measurement partner, for more than 50% of all the ads out there. And one of the Google execs actually says in email, he probably regrets it quite a bit, and I'm paraphrasing, it's as if we both ran the New York Stock Exchange and owned JP Morgan. And yeah, there's some conflict of interest there.
When you say it like that. Hey.
And they took advantage of the conflict of interest. They didn't say, oh, well, we're on both sides, we better be clean hands and do everything the right way. They did not. They started bullying and winning competitive market share by any means necessary in ways that were anti-competitive. I mean, the government, the Department of Justice has won its case. Federal judge has said it was monopolistic behavior. The EU has said it's monopolistic behavior. There's a state case. There's a Canadian case. There's just so many cases out there on this subject. And their behavior was really crossed the line at some point. So this is not an anti-Google book. I'm just holding them accountable for what I think is overall a pretty interesting story.
Well, and that's certainly why, in even setting up this chat, it seems like a very much a book of the moment. And I wondered, that's, obviously with things lumbering through the courts sometimes for years, but it's obviously something that you had teed up. But what was that like, working on something that was, I mean, writing about anything in digital is always a moving target, but especially this.
Yeah, so this has been going on for quite some time. But what prompted the book was that I decided to go down to Virginia to the courthouse to cover the actual case. So the case took place, there's a bunch of cases, but the federal case was in what's called the Rocket Docket. And that's the Eastern Virginia district that just moves really fast. And so the Biden administration brought this case just a couple years ago, and it went right to trial, I think in like 2 years, which is just crazy. And I said to myself, I was sitting here in New York doing my podcasting thing, talking about advertising, and I was like, you're an idiot if you don't go down to Virginia. Like, what are you doing with your life? You should be there. This is like your Roman Empire, man. So I did. I'm sort of a fake journalist. I take the train down there and I sit in the courtroom for 3 weeks, taking notes, writing newsletters, and reporting on it. And at the end, I was like, I got to write this. This is too good a story. It's a human story. There are people on the testifying who are saying things like, they lied to me. I had to fire 200 people because of what Google did. I've never trusted them. They gaslit me. And it was pretty interesting. And so you're right. It was a moving target, but after the case was over and we were waiting for a decision, I was able to jump on it and cover this area in a way that goes kind of a level of depth that probably only I could have done because I also worked in the area.
So what is Google's power meant for smaller ad tech companies? Have they adapted, been acquired, or been steamrolled?
Steamrolled. So in certain sectors. So ad tech is very complicated. There's lots of little sectors in it. The most important piece of ad tech is called a publisher ad server. It's what the journalist supported ad-supported journalism uses. So companies like the News Corps of the world, the Gannett's of the world, they all use Google. And what was clear from the testimony was the competition was all crushed. Currently in the U.S., Google's ad server, which is called GAM or Google Ad Manager, has 90% market share. That's a very high number. So that's not a good sector to be in. And numerous smaller companies were just shunted to the side or had to pivot their business models or whatever. But there are other areas that are more competitive. Like on the buy side, the demand side platform, the technology used to buy ads programmatically, is fairly competitive. You have Google still number one, but not 50% market share, more like 30. And then the Trade Desk is a public company. And then you have Amazon, and you have quite a few smaller companies. So they're anti-competitive behavior really hit some people pretty hard and certainly benefited their whole stack, but it wasn't, a trump card throughout the entire industry.
So in looking at kind of where things are sitting now, if regulators end up breaking up Google tomorrow, what what are some of the things that could change for advertisers and consumers?
Well, it's an interesting question because the consensus is that the world that's sometimes shorthand, the open web is the shorthand people use, meaning websites and journalism and stuff like that. It's on decline. It's in decline because of AI and because of consumer behavior and the move to social. People get their news from social instead of the web. So there are some pretty significant challenges to that market, even if Google had nothing to do with it on the ad tech side. But with that said, the factor of having a single like monoculture of technology in the space has certainly reduced the competitiveness and innovation in the space. If you were an entrepreneur with some new idea for how to help journalists and publishers make more money on their websites, your first task would be figuring out how to integrate with Google, because you really just can't even operate unless that toll booth is paid. And that really reduces the flexibility to do interesting things. To give one example that I think is pretty relevant here is like Facebook. So Facebook is the second largest source of advertising in the world after Google, and they abandoned the web like several years ago. They just they don't do any web advertising. I mean, obviously on Facebook.com they do, but on the open web, they don't buy ads at all. And that's a lot of money that's on the sidelines. And there were documents presented in court where the Facebook executives said they didn't want to participate in open web because they felt like everything they did was gatekept by Google, right? They couldn't get to the actual essence of the problem. Now, I don't know if Facebook would ever re-enter the market. There's probably some other reasons they don't want to be in the web and they want to only be in app. But it makes it less abstract what the issues are here when you hear about this, literally the second largest source of advertising dollars abandoning this entire area because of the monopoly.
That's a really good point too in talking about the Facebook side of things, because you've got another enormous company. Who are some of the other major players in the ecosystem, and how has this impacted them?
Yeah, so on the sell side, meaning publisher tools, the two big ones that are public are called Magnite and PubMatic. They're both publicly traded companies. Billions of dollars of advertising run through them. They're tech companies, though. They're not consumer-facing at all. There are others like Index Exchange, OpenX, really a whole gamut of them. On the buy side, I mentioned earlier, Trade Desk is one of the largest buy-side companies. And then those are just the tech side. You also have the principals to the transaction. So the advertisers and their agencies, people like WPP, Omnicom, Dentsu, all those companies that control huge amounts of budget and often have deals with Google to have minimum commitments of spend to them. That's something I didn't go into in the book that much, but is also kind of a concern for some antitrust folks. And then on the sell side, obviously you have publishers. So the traditional broadcasters who have all now moved to ad-supported streaming services like Peacock and Hulu, and all those things are ad-supported, or at least have a good chunk of their revenue supported by ads. And those ads need to come from somewhere, and they don't want, in many cases, Google to be a choke point for those ads, even though they often have to be.
This season, the game begins before the games begin. On August 26th, it's FanDuel Futures Day. 24 hours of deals on all your football season predictions. Futures Day is coming. Visit the FanDuel app to learn more and get your picks ready now. FanDuel, play your game. 21 plus and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
So, this being the On Brand podcast, I'm also curious from someone that's been following this for a while, studying this, reporting, and that is a part of the story, as you noted. I think one thing that maybe factored into buying Google some time in all of this was that the public image of their brand was one that was lifted up for many years of the, not being evil and, great innovative workplace and kind of all of the, bright public facing part of the story that's somewhat at odds with the behind the scenes behavior that you're talking about. How did that factor in, and how might that do more people understand that it's not maybe all the sunshine and rainbows that we thought?
It's an interesting company, right? Let's just start there. I used to work at Google. I don't know if we disclosed that, but I was at Google for 2 years, so I have a little insight here. Google has since its founding 2 decades ago, it's a masterclass in brand building. Masterclass. I mean, they became the number one most recognized brand in the world in many surveys, or number one most valuable brand in the world, and they didn't do any advertising. Coca-Cola had 100 years of spending money. Google, all they did was put a cool little logo at a text box, and suddenly they were a loved brand, and they still are. I use Google constantly. It's probably my number one software partner for my personal life and my work. So that brand is still very strong. And they are very conscious of that when there are decisions to be made internal to the company, at least in my experience. The idea of sullying the Google brand is like a third rail. Like, if you wouldn't take a chance at making search look bad in any way. And so what we're talking about here is a little bit inside baseball. It's B2B. It's not really reflecting consumers. Google's a pretty good steward of consumer privacy, despite certain headlines and lawsuits and stuff like that, compared to other tech companies. I trust Google with my data more than some other ones. So I'm not sure it matters. And it's similar to Apple, I think. Apple obviously has an amazing brand with consumers. And in the B2B world, the people who work with them on the App Store and on advertising, they hate them. Like, they're the worst. So I think I think to date there hasn't been any repercussion on the brand.
Well, and I think you point out an interesting reason why, in the case of both Apple and Google, is the consumer part of this story. It's almost like you're saying, the B2B, the industry, the supply side, all of those different things are almost happening at a different level beyond the public. It's almost, the closest any of this has gotten is court cases bubbling up into the news and media at large.
Yeah, I think you could draw a contrast with Facebook and Meta, who has gotten one black eye after another and has had impacts on consumers. Consumers do not love the Facebook brand nearly as much as Google or Apple, and they have not weathered privacy storms, and people don't trust them. And the way that affects people, when you think about brand, what does it mean? I mean, one definition of brand is being able to charge more than the commodity price, but there's also kind of a thought of like the ability to roll out new products and get adoption. And when Facebook rolls out a crypto product, and everyone's like, I don't know about that. And then when Facebook rolls out virtual reality, and you're gonna live in your virtual reality, it's like, do we trust them? I'm not sure I want my kids in the Facebook product. So I think that's where you start seeing some real impact of brand awareness and brand values.
Yeah. Well, you talked a bit about privacy earlier. And as we look at the changing regulation landscape, is there anything on the horizon that could potentially loosen or tighten the Google grip?
Yeah, so there's a whole drama around Google and privacy that is way in the weeds. I only put a couple paragraphs in the book about it, but so third-party cookies, I think everyone listening to this probably knows what they are. They allow anonymous identification of users across the web, and Chrome allows them, and Chrome is the dominant browser, and Google went through this convoluted and painful process of trying to get rid of third-party cookies, and they got stymied by regulators, by arrogance, by poor planning, and the end result is they're staying. So third-party cookies are not going away, and this is a big foot fault by Google. Like, they really messed this up. But no one cares. That's it's in the category of no one cares. What I think the most interesting thing going on right now is the other antitrust case, which is the search antitrust case, which is moving ahead a little faster than ad tech, and is not the subject of my book, but is really important because probably by the, I don't know when this pod is being released, but probably by the time it's being released, there will have been a judgment by the judge in that case to potentially force a spin out of the Chrome browser. which has 60% desktop market share or even more. And the Chrome browser is the gateway. That is where privacy decisions are made. And so you can imagine one scenario where it's spun out to a commerce-oriented company like an Amazon. And they're like, hell yeah, let's show more ads. Let's buy some toothpaste, right? And then, or you can imagine a world where it's spun out to a company that is, or to a nonprofit, or a company that feels like, they want to protect consumers and not make money on it. In which case, you could have a pretty big decline in the ability to target users or collect data. So that's a giant wild card.
So we've talked about Google, obviously. Apple's come up, Facebook, Meta, Amazon. These are the companies that have dominated the landscape, and many of them with a MarTech component as well. In looking ahead, are there other companies that are up and comers that we'll be talking about, a few years down the road, looking back at the role they played, or are the big players, is their grip going to stay as tight as it seems like it is right now?
Well, we're in the midst of the biggest disruption since the iPhone, and that's AI. So for the past 15 years, let's say, Google search traffic has been going up. Their monetization has been going up. Their market share has been going up in every country around the world, to the point where it's over 90% in most places. In Europe, it's like 97% or something like that. And it seemed like it would never end, the greatest business model ever created. And suddenly, AI, or really more specifically, large language models come out, and you can go from a search result, which gives you links that you could click on, to an answer. It's an answer,
right?
It is not a search result, and that is, in the proverbial Silicon Valley speak, 10 times better. The answer is 10 times better than the search results, and consumers actually will switch when something's 10 times better. And so we are already seeing market share declines from Google for the first time ever. We're seeing consumers use alternative searches, maybe not Perplexity, which is the alternative search engine, but just use ChatGPT for ordinary questions and answers. And Google is responding with Gemini, and it throws everything up in the air. We do not know what this disruptive technology is going to do in the long term to consumer behavior. It's very early. And there is, I hate to always bring up antitrust, but there's an antitrust angle here too, because the Google search case is taking AI into consideration, and they're trying to block Google from sort of reestablishing another monopoly as we move into the space.
So you've, in your work, I mean, I asked you to do a little future casting, but, what are you watching in terms of how things are unfolding? I'm thinking of the old, adage of skating to where the puck is going to be, and where for marketers is that puck heading?
Yeah, I think the AI disruption is number one. So SEO is dead. SEM might be changing significantly in the way the answers show up. You have a totally different set of challenges with consumers looking to find out information about your products. A lot of startups are in that space. I've invested in one or two, but it's not clear what that product's going to be. As a marketer, you might start thinking about, like, I have a website that a consumer views. They will look at some pretty images, and they look at a little comparison chart or something like that. That same website, when it's being viewed by an LLM, could have literally 100,000 words about your product, right? Because the LLM doesn't care. It could read them. And so it's a very different way of communicating the value of your product. So that's one giant question. The other thing I think is that influencer marketing is real, because it always starts with consumers. Consumers are changing their behavior, and they're getting more information from algorithmically driven sites, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, etc. And so you can either pay to get in front of your consumers in those spots, which is fine, but you need to have a way to get in front of those consumers in a meaningful way where the message, the creative, the influence all comes together. And I think that's just a really big trend, and one that probably brands are still under investing in.
So, a lot of your work at Marketecture is about bringing clarity to this very complex world of ad tech. Is there a buzzword right now that you're tired of hearing about?
Transparency.
Okay.
So transparency.
Say more.
Yeah. So ad tech goes back and forth between results and transparency, and you may think, oh, they go together, but they don't really. So think of it as like the devil angel on your shoulders. The devil says, just give me your budget and I'll get you what you want, and don't ask too many questions. And the angel says, no, you need to know exactly what you're buying, or else you're not living up to your brand standards. And who knows, you could be on a bad website. And they both have a good point. However, it seems pretty clear that the devil's winning, and that if you look at publicly traded companies, the amount of money that Facebook makes, Facebook's not transparent. Google's not transparent. Google's biggest growing product in the advertising world is called PMax, and PMax barely tells you where your ads ran, but it wins. It's just better. AppLovin, publicly traded company that basically just buys on apps and gives you good results. So I think the imperative for transparency is real. It's smart to say, well, I want to know where my money's going. I want to know every dime, blah, blah, blah. But it only makes sense if what you do with that information has as high a ROI as the non-transparent version. And that's tough, like for agency people or whatever. They don't have the AI, they don't have the algorithms. And so I think that transparency is kind of on the outs, and we're going to get more and more performance.
Well, I have smiled several points during our conversation, and it's now my opportunity to get to ask you, Ari, for a brand that has made you smile recently.
Okay, what's the name of this brand? So I'm not a big clothes person. I dress like a slob. But I was walking around with my wife in our neighborhood in New York, and we wandered into a store called it's a chain called what's it called, Buck Wilson? Is that the name of it? Buck what is it called? It's called it's Buck Mason. There we go.
Buck Mason.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you ever shopped there?
No, but I feel like I've seen ads
You've
from
seen
there,
it.
so it does seem probably in my general sphere of audience target.
It's like if a mad scientist figured out like how to create a store that's perfect for an associate creative director at an agency. It's got like black t-shirts, a car for no reason, like a classic car right in the middle. It's got like a lot of art books skewed around in seemingly no order, but you can tell they're placed exactly where they need to be. A liquor bar, if you're buying expensive clothing, they'll give you a shot to loosen your wallet up. And the clothes are pretty nice. And I just appreciated how perfectly on the nose their entire brand experience was. And then my wife started looking them up to see, is this real or is this? And it turns out it's not real. It's like it was created in Venice Beach like less than a decade ago by some like probably ACDs that wanted to make clothing. But they did it. I appreciate good branding.
I love it. That is a fun story, and it sounds like an internet rabbit hole for me to go down later, which will then trigger more ads coming my way. So, Ari, where can folks go to learn more about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So for me, aripaparo.com. So I have a long name, but it's pretty easy to Google. And my company is called Marketecture, which is kind of like architecture with an M at the beginning. And that's where you can subscribe to my podcast, newsletters, and other things that we do. If you're into ad tech, you should definitely subscribe. If you want advertising in general, we have a lot of products that are a little bit less geeky. We own the website adland.tv, which is a repository of 80,000 TV commercials from like the 1973 Super Bowl forward. It's a total waste of time. Like you could get lost on that website pretty fast, and it's a lot of fun. So I've got a lot of stuff going on.
Awesome. Well, all kinds of internet rabbit holes for later then, because I love some old school ads. Well, we will link up to all of that in our show notes, which folks can find at onbrandpodcast.com. Ari Paparo, thanks for being on brand with us.
This was great. Thanks, Nick.
On Brand is part of the Marketing Podcast Network. If you like what you're hearing, if we've made you smile, you can always listen free on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or whatever your favorite platform may be. And please take a moment and rate and review the podcast to help others find the show. Until next week, I'm Nick Westergaard, and I'll see you on the internet.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Robbie Samuels hosts the On the Schmooze podcast. Robbie, tell listeners what to expect from the show.
Since 2015, I've interviewed entrepreneurs who overcame challenges to achieve success in their field or industry. Tune in to On the Schmooze to listen as I ask deep questions to elicit untold stories about leadership and networking.
And where can people subscribe?
Find the show at ontheschmooze.com or on marketingpodcast.net, or just search for it wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard them. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.